All right, crypto fans, welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're going to dig into some Litecoin news. We're talking about a possible Litecoin spot ETF. For anyone who needs a refresher, an ETF is kind of like a basket of assets, like stocks. They're a really popular way to make investing easier, diversifying your portfolio. The ETF we're looking at today is Canary Capital's Litecoin spot ETF, ticker symbol LTCC. And guess what? It just got listed on the DTCC. That's the Depository Trust and Clearing Corporation. Basically, they handle all the behind-the-scenes stuff for trading. So this listing is a pretty big deal, but it's not a done deal, all right? The SEC still needs to give their approval. To break this all down, we've got an awesome expert with us today.
Glad to be here. The world of crypto is always moving, that's for sure.
Yeah, you got that right. So let's start with the basics. What makes ETFs so attractive to investors? Why is everyone so hyped about them?
Imagine you want to invest in, let's say, renewable energy companies. But there are so many to choose from, right? Buying individual stocks would be, well, kind of nightmare. ETFs bundle those assets together, so you can invest in a whole sector with just one purchase. It's super convenient. Plus, it helps diversify your portfolio.
Okay, that makes sense. So for someone watching CoinTalk Podcast on YouTube who wants to try out crypto, a Litecoin ETF would be a simple way to add it to their investments. No need to deal with those tricky crypto exchanges, huh?
Exactly. That's a big reason why this DTCC listing for the LTCC is making waves. It means the groundwork for trading this ETF is being laid. Things are moving.
So it's like they're building the foundation, but we're still waiting for the actual building, right?
That's a great way to put it. And even though we're waiting for the SEC's approval, this is a really good sign for Litecoin. It shows Canary Capital is serious about getting this ETF up and running.
One thing in the article stood out to me. If this gets approved, the LTCC would be the first U.S. spot ETF for a cryptocurrency other than Bitcoin and Ethereum. We've seen those big names get their ETFs, but this is stepping into altcoin territory. What could this mean for other altcoins out there?
That's the big question, isn't it? If the LTCC gets approved, it could be a game changer for other altcoins. It would basically tell the market and other companies that regulators are okay with crypto ETFs, even beyond the most famous ones.
This is like opening the door for a ton of new possibilities.
You got it. And it's not just talk. Big players like Grayscale and CoinShares are already filing for Litecoin ETFs too. This is definitely a trend, not just a random event.
Wow, that's interesting. Seems like everyone's getting excited about Litecoin again.
Yeah.
Speaking of excitement, Bloomberg analyst Eric Balchunas gave this ETF a 90% chance of approval. Do you think he's just caught up in the hype, or is that a real possibility?
Eric Balchunas knows his stuff when it comes to ETFs, and 90% is a bold prediction, no doubt. But the way things are going with regulations and the SEC being more open to crypto, it's not impossible. They've already approved Bitcoin futures ETFs, so a spot ETF might not be far off.
So they're kind of testing the waters, but still being careful, right?
Exactly. And there are a bunch of things the SEC is going to look at closely before they decide on the LTCC. The article mentions the NASDAQ 19B4 filing and the public comment period, which is normal procedure. What's interesting is the SEC has 90 days from February 4th to make a decision.
The countdown is on.
Yep. And while that stuff is important, the SEC is going to go deeper than that. They'll look at things like custody solutions, meaning how they'll hold and protect those Litecoin assets. And they'll check for good trading surveillance to prevent market manipulation.
Good to know they're being thorough. Protecting investors is their job, right? Speaking of investors, anyone watching CoinTalk Podcast on YouTube has probably seen Litecoin's been doing pretty well. It's up 4% in the past 24 hours because of this news, and even more over the past few weeks. So for anyone watching who's thinking, should I buy Litecoin now? Now, what do you think? Is this the start of something big, or is it too early to say?
It's easy to get caught up in the excitement, especially with those gains. But remember, investing is about planning, not jumping in without thinking. ETFs are for the long term, not quick profits. This price jump is probably because of speculation and anticipation. It's exciting, but it doesn't guarantee future success.
So don't go all in on Litecoin just yet.
Exactly. Do your research, figure out how much risk you're comfortable with, and remember to diversify. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, no matter how tempting it looks.
That's some great advice. And hey, for everyone watching CoinTalk Podcast on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe and give this video a thumbs up if you're finding this deep dive helpful. And if you're new here, welcome. We cover everything crypto, so you're in the right place. Be sure to leave a comment below and tell us what you think about this possible Litecoin ETF. We want to know your thoughts. Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about the SEC's role in all this. What exactly are they looking for when they decide whether to approve an ETF, especially one for cryptocurrency?
That's a great question. It's important to understand where the SEC is coming from. They've always been cautious about crypto, and there are some good reasons for that. Their main job is to protect investors and keep things fair. And, especially when crypto was new, it was kind of like the Wild West.
So they're not against crypto, they're just being extra careful.
That's right. And that carefulness shows up in how they handle ETF applications. They're really focused on protecting investors, watching the market closely, and making sure everyone plays fair.
Makes sense. Nobody wants the crypto market to turn into a Wild West again. We've covered a lot in this first part of our deep dive. We talked about ETFs, the LTCC getting listed on the DTCC, and the SEC's cautious but kind of open approach to crypto. So before we move on to part 2, where we'll dig even deeper into the SEC's role, I want to remind everyone watching on YouTube that this is just the start of our Litecoin ETF journey. We've got so much more to explore, like the challenges the LTCC might face, what a Litecoin ETF would mean in the long run, and which other altcoins may be next in line to get their own ETFs. So buckle up, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and get ready for an even deeper dive in part 2.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive, everyone. If you're just joining us on CoinTalk Podcast, we're right in the middle of exploring Litecoin ETFs.
Yep, that's right. In part 1, we talked about the basics of ETFs and the big news about Canary Capital's Litecoin Spot ETF, the LTCC, getting listed on the DTCC. And we even touched on how the SEC is being, kind of cautious about crypto. So in part 2, we're going to try to figure out what the SEC is really thinking. Like, what are they worried about when it comes to crypto? And what do they really want to see before they approve an ETF application? Because honestly, they haven't always been crypto's biggest fan.
Yeah, that's true. They've always been pretty cautious, and for good reason. I mean, their top priority is protecting investors. And the crypto market, especially back in the day, was a bit of a free-for-all, Not a lot of rules, tons of scams going around, prices all over the place.
Yeah, like the digital gold rush. Exciting, but kind of dangerous too.
Exactly. And that leads to another big worry for the SEC market manipulation. Crypto markets are still pretty small, and they can change really quickly. That makes them vulnerable to big players, the so-called whales, trying to control things.
So it's not just about the price going up and down a lot, it's about making sure everyone has a fair chance.
Right. The SEC doesn't want crypto ETFs to become just another way for those whales to mess with the market and maybe hurt smaller investors. It's tough, They want to encourage new ideas, but also keep things stable and honest.
That makes a lot of sense. Sounds like they're trying to walk a tightrope between supporting crypto and protecting people.
Yeah, they are. And you can really see that balancing act in how they handle ETF applications, especially for crypto. One of the main things they look at is custody solutions. That means how those crypto assets are actually held and kept safe. They want to be sure there's a really solid system to prevent theft or loss.
So it's not enough for a company to just say, hey, we want to make a Litecoin ETF. They got to show they've thought about how to keep those digital assets safe. Right?
Absolutely. And they also look really closely at the company applying for the ETF, their history and experience. Is this a reliable company with a good track record? Do they really understand the crypto market and all its quirks?
It's like trying to get into a really exclusive club. They want to make sure you're the right kind of member.
That's a good way to think about it. And another important thing the SEC looks at is market surveillance. They want to see strong systems in place to catch and prevent stuff like market manipulation, insider trading, and all those shady things that can make the market unfair.
So they're basically saying, show us you're going to play by the rules.
Exactly. And then there's the whole mess of laws and regulations around crypto, which are different all over the world. It's a lot to figure out.
For anyone watching CoinTalk Podcast on YouTube who's new to all this, it can definitely seem overwhelming. But that's why we do these deep dives, right? To break it all down and make it easier to understand. So let's bring it back to the LTCC. Knowing all this about what the SEC worries about and how carefully they check things, what do you think the chances are that this ETF will actually get approved? Are we getting ahead of ourselves with all this excitement?
That's the million-dollar question. Predicting what the SEC will do is almost impossible. But there are a few things that could help the LTCC get approved.
Okay, so there's hope. Tell us more. What are those things?
Well, first off, it's a Litecoin ETF, not a Bitcoin ETF. You might think Bitcoin would be less risky since it's the most well-known cryptocurrency, right?
Yeah, that's what I would have thought.
But actually, the SEC has already rejected a bunch of applications for Bitcoin spot ETFs. They said they were worried about market manipulation and custody issues. So approving a Litecoin ETF first could be a way for them to show they're willing to work with the crypto market, but starting with something a little less volatile and maybe a bit under the radar.
So like a trial run for them, dipping their toes in before jumping into the Bitcoin deep end.
Exactly. And it also helps that other big players like Grayscale and CoinShares have applied for Litecoin ETFs too. That shows that serious companies are interested in Litecoin and that the industry is trying to address the SEC's concerns.
It's like everyone's telling the SEC, we're ready for this, let's go.
Yeah, kinda. And don't forget how positive the market reaction has been to this news. Litecoin's price has been going up and investors seem really optimistic. The SEC doesn't just follow market trends, of course, but it does show there's a lot of demand for a Litecoin ETF.
So even the market is saying, let's do this. All right, so to recap this part of our deep dive, the SEC has a really important role in deciding whether an ETF gets approved. And their concerns, especially with crypto, are totally valid. But even though they've been cautious in the past, there are some good reasons to think the LTCC might actually get approved. It could be a kind of test case for the SEC. More and more companies are getting interested in Litecoin, and the market seems to be totally on board. It's definitely an exciting time to be following all this.
It is. And for those of you watching CoinTalk Podcast on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned for part 3. We'll be talking about what a Litecoin ETF could mean for investors like you and for the future of crypto. We'll be right back.
All right, we're back for the final part of our Litecoin ETF deep dive here on CoinTalk Podcast. In part 1, we got the basics down about ETFs and celebrated the LTCC getting listed on the DTCC. Then in part 2, we took a close look at the SEC, their worries about crypto, and how they go about evaluating ETFs. So now the big question, what does all this mean for investors and the future of crypto?
Things are about to get really interesting. Oh, and before we jump in, if you're joining us on CoinTalk Podcast, don't forget to subscribe and give this video a thumbs up if you're enjoying this Litecoin deep dive.
Yes, definitely. We love seeing your comments and questions, so keep them coming. Okay, let's talk strategy. Let's say the LTCC does get approved by the SEC. What are some smart ways for our viewers to approach this, this potential investment?
Well, first things first, it's super important to remember that any crypto investment, even ETFs, comes with risk. This market is still pretty new, and like we talked about, it can be really volatile. So don't let FOMO, that fear of missing out, make your decisions for you.
Right, it's not like investing in some big established company that's been around forever. Crypto is still figuring things out. So yeah, being a responsible investor is super important.
Exactly. Before you do anything, do your research, figure out how much risk you're comfortable with, and make sure your crypto investments fit in with your overall financial goals.
Solid advice. So someone's watching CoinTalk Podcast, they've done their homework, and they're thinking about adding some Litecoin to their portfolio. What are some strategies they could try if the LTCC does get approved?
Well, the simplest thing is just to buy shares of the LTCC once it's available on the market. That way, they get exposure to Litecoin without the hassle of actually buying and managing the cryptocurrency themselves.
Like getting a piece of the pie without having to bake it, right?
Perfect analogy. And since ETFs are traded on regular stock exchanges, it's an easy process for most investors.
Plus, don't forget all the benefits of diversifying we've been talking about. Adding a Litecoin ETF to a well-rounded portfolio can help spread the risk and maybe even boost returns.
You got it. Diversification is so important for smart investing. Don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Now, for those viewers who are a little more experienced with crypto, buying Litecoin directly on an exchange is another option.
That's true, but it's important to remember that holding cryptocurrency yourself comes with its own challenges. You got to choose a good exchange, and you have to make sure your digital assets are safe, maybe using a hardware wallet.
So both ways have their pros and cons. It all depends on how comfortable you are and how much risk you're willing to take. But hey, that's what CoinTalk Podcast is all about. We're here to give you the info you need to make good decisions. Now let's zoom out a bit and think about the bigger picture. If the LTCC does get approved, what kind of impact could that have on the whole crypto market?
It could be huge. Like we mentioned before, if the SEC approves a Litecoin ETF, that could open the door for ETFs based on other altcoins too.
Like that first domino falling and then bam, a whole chain reaction across all the altcoins.
Exactly. And that could have a massive impact on the whole market, how much crypto is worth and how many people use it.
Because suddenly it becomes much easier for everyday people to invest in crypto.
That's it. And easier access usually leads to more demand. That can push prices up and encourage even more innovation. It's a win-win for the whole crypto world.
So this LTCC decision could be way bigger than just Litecoin itself. It could change how the mainstream financial world sees and interacts with cryptocurrencies.
Absolutely. This is definitely something to watch closely. And speaking of watching closely, if you want to stay ahead of the game, keep an eye on other promising altcoins like Cardano, Solana, and Polkadot.
We've done deep dives on all those projects here on CoinTalk Podcast, so
Yeah.
make sure to check out those episodes if you want to learn more about their features and potential. But a word of caution, the SEC's approval process can be unpredictable, and there's no guarantee that any of these altcoins will get their own ETFs soon.
Yeah, it's a waiting game for sure, but that's also part of what makes crypto so exciting.
Totally agree. Well, that wraps up our 3-part deep dive into Litecoin ETFs here on CoinTalk Podcast. We covered a ton of information, from the excitement of the LTCC listing to the SEC's careful evaluation process and what all this could mean for investors and the crypto market as a whole. If you enjoyed this deep dive, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future crypto adventures. We're here every week breaking down complex stuff and giving you the insights you need to navigate the crazy world of crypto. And hey, don't forget to share this video with your friends. Let's get everyone talking about crypto. Until next time, happy investing and may your portfolios be evergreen.